Hello, everyone. I'm Kibin Alleyne, and today is Tuesday, May 9th. You're now watching Open, a program bringing the Bronx and New York City straight to you. Don't forget to stay connected with us via social media at BronxNet TV. Mayor Eric Adams released a $106.7 billion budget proposal for fiscal year 2024. This budget proposal is currently the largest executive budget in city history. However, budget cuts to several institutions could possibly hinder the city's economic growth. Joining me to discuss this concern is Editorial and Policy Director for the Center of an Urban Future, Eli Dvorkin. Eli, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me today.
Now, I want to jump right into it. Can you just talk about what an annual executive budget is? I've heard it before, but it's not something that I'm super familiar with, and I'm sure others probably feel the same. So can you just explain what that is?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So, we are, I think the technical term is neck deep in budget season right now. This is really the middle of the process. The executive budget is a document that comes from the mayor of New York City, and it is not the first budget that the mayor has proposed. That starts back at the beginning of the year with what's called the preliminary budget. Then the city council holds hearings, produces a budget response document, and this executive budget is essentially the mayor's response to that budget, the council's response. This is the mayor's response to the response, if you will, that incorporates some of their feedback. It also reshuffles some of his own priorities. And ultimately, it's the last draft document that the city will put forward before the final budget is decided before July 1st.
Now, who gets to help make these decisions? You talked a little bit about council members. Do they say what they would like, and then eventually at this part, this is where the mayor says, yes, we can do that, or no?
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that going on. So the council's already been holding a round of hearings that were to review the preliminary budget and to craft a response. That response came out just a couple of weeks ago. And so this is really the mayor, in some cases, responding to the council's shifting priorities or where the council sees the need for the greatest additional investment, but also reshuffling some priorities of his own. And at this point, we now get a clearer picture of what the mayor wants to put forward for next year's budget, where he's already moving a little bit closer to the council's position, but also some areas where we see that the council and the mayor are still quite far apart.
Now, according to City and State, Mayor Adams said they had to make some very tough decisions, and that includes cuts to places like New York Public Library, or just public libraries in general, and CUNYs. Can you explain basically what that means and what could be cut from either of these institutions?
Sure. So unfortunately, these are two of, I think, the most concerning potential cuts in next year's budget. What we've seen so far is that CUNY is facing a budget decrease compared to last year of almost $90 million. Now, the city has actually put additional dollars into CUNY this year compared to last year, but CUNY's also lost some significant federal funding that it had during the pandemic, as well as some funding that comes from other city agencies. And so ultimately, the whole institution is facing a net decrease of about $89 million. So that's a real concern for New Yorkers who care about economic mobility, which CUNY is expert at. Now, the libraries are also facing significant cuts in this year's budget. You may have heard some news in the last couple of weeks that the mayor's called off the budget cuts. That's not really accurate. What happened was the mayor has said that the program to eliminate the gap, a kind of mid-year budget reduction program, from April will not apply to the city's libraries. But the libraries are still subject to an earlier peg from January, and they're also facing an overall decrease in their annual budget for next year. So despite holding off on the April peg, the city's three library systems are also currently facing a reduction of about $40 million compared to last year.
Now, I'm pretty sure these are maybe the two most concerning, as you mentioned, but I'm sure there are other cuts. What impact will this just have on our city overall?
Sure. Well, I think these two reductions that we're talking about are really particularly concerning because New York City is still facing enormous challenges in ensuring an equitable and full recovery for all New Yorkers from the impact of the pandemic. And I think these two institutions are uniquely well positioned to help the city come out of that period and be able to create the fundamental bedrock of a more equitable city in the future. And what I mean by that is, well, first of all, the cuts at CUNY could actually impact not only faculty and staff lines, but some of the most effective student success programs that CUNY offers today. Programs like the CUNY ASAP initiative, the CUNY ACE program, which are helping students beat the odds and achieve graduation rates that really aren't possible without the support of those programs. But CUNY is going to have to make some tough decisions if these cuts go through. And one of the potential consequences would be a reduction in the number of seats available in those kinds of student success initiatives that are actually boosting college completion rates and helping more New Yorkers achieve economic opportunity. Now, the same is really true of libraries, where on the chopping block right now, we're seeing Saturday service, longer hours, programs that New Yorkers depend on, whether that's early literacy programs or specific programs for teens or for older adults, for immigrants. So there's some really difficult decisions on the table for those institutions right now that really don't have much fat left to cut.
Now, I always say this as somebody who grew up in a library. The library offers so much, and I think that sometimes it can often get overlooked. And you mentioned the importance of just CUNY programs helping people, achieve higher education. When I was looking at this, I couldn't help but realize that, this is affecting education in our city. Can you just talk about, why that's how could that impact low income communities, especially, where places like the library offers free services. Sometimes there's stuff for people who speak different languages. Could you just talk about, how that's going to affect some vulnerable New Yorkers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, I think both CUNY and our city's public libraries are really the key opportunity institutions that we have in New York City. They help New Yorkers every single day from low income backgrounds be able to move into the middle class, to be able to access programs and services that they're eligible for but might not know about, to really support the entire continuum of learning from early literacy all the way through to degree granting programs for working adults. And so all of these programs and services really help the most vulnerable New Yorkers, help low income New Yorkers get ahead. And the risk right now is that these are not being treated as investments in the city's economic and social well-being, but really as just sort of budget items to cut. That's really the wrong way to look at this. I mean, for instance, a CUNY degree is so incredibly transformative in the lives of many New Yorkers. A New Yorker with a bachelor's degree will earn about $1.1 million more over their lifetime than someone without one. And CUNY helps more New Yorkers from low-income backgrounds earn degrees than any other institution. But it needs the support of these city dollars to be able to invest in the programs that actually help boost college completion. For instance, like the CUNY ACE program for senior college students, which is boosting graduation rates by about 25%. But those programs require operating dollars to be able to continue, and there's a real risk that they may not with these budget cuts in place.
Now, how will these cuts hinder economic growth and development, just in general, for our city?
Sure. Well, I think that's a really interesting question because a lot of folks might not assume that investments in social infrastructure like libraries or educational institutions like CUNY would have an impact on economic growth or economic development. But I think really right now what we're seeing is that New York City's talent, the ability of New York City to develop the talent that employers need today, that our economy needs to thrive, is really the city's greatest competitive advantage. The more that we can, as a city, invest in programs and institutions that help New Yorkers gain the skills and education and experiences they need to thrive in a fast-changing economy, not only will we create a more equitable economy, but we'll create a stronger economy that's more competitive with other cities around the globe. So these kinds of investments are critical for ensuring that we have a strong and an equitable economy going forward.
Now, I understand you work for the Center for an Urban Future, where your organization focuses on reducing inequality, increasing economic mobility, and just grow the economy in general in New York City. Considering that these budgets, this budget just has to happen in general. What is something that you feel could have been done to avoid the situation, but still kind of get to where we need to be when it comes to making these tough decisions?
Yeah, well, there's no question that it's a difficult process. There's some real macro challenges facing the city's economy, the decline in potential tax revenues from the hit that commercial real estate is taking, some of the bigger unanswered questions about the future of New York City's economy in an age of remote and hybrid work. These are big questions. I think in many cases, there's some thinking that's gone into this budget that does get ahead of some of those potential challenges. For instance, full funding for the CUNY Reconnect initiative that's helping New Yorkers with some college credits but no degree to return to CUNY and complete. That's not only a college completion strategy, it's also boosting CUNY's enrollment after years of declines. It's also helping New Yorkers, and there's about 680,000 folks in this category with some college credits but without a credential, to be able to earn the degrees where they can actually get ahead in our fast changing economy. So these are smart long-term investments, but I think that's the thinking that needs to go into this budget from the get-go, to be able to focus on investments in social and economic mobility as the underpinnings of a strong economy. And frankly, public libraries play a critical role there too. We need to be investing in that kind of social infrastructure so that New Yorkers feel like no matter which community they live in, that they live in a place where they have the opportunities to thrive. And that might look like, in the case of public libraries, more dollars for actually opening longer hours to be available to working adults and parents on the weekends, early mornings or later in the evenings. And right now, we're actually seeing that the investments that we have in our library systems today don't allow our libraries to be open as long as those in Seattle or in Columbus, Ohio, or in Toronto, Canada. So we actually have a long way to go to be able to make our city more comparable to some of those other places in terms of the resources that we provide our residents.
Now, what can people do if they notice some of the resources that they rely on are disappearing? And this is due to the budget cuts, and they'll probably see them sometime soon. What can they do when they notice that?
Well, first I'll say none of this is in stone just yet. The state's budget has just been finalized at the time the show is airing. We're going to see some real changes. The mayors had to be smart about thinking through what the city budget will look like without knowing at that time what the state budget was going to look like. So this process is very much fluid. Folks that can care and are concerned about these issues should reach out to their elected officials. The budget will be negotiated over the next few weeks, and there won't be a final budget until June. So there is time to influence the process as a New Yorker, to get informed about what is and what isn't in the budget. Frankly, I encourage New Yorkers, and I think very few of my fellow New Yorkers do this today, but to check out New York City's Office of Management and Budget website. The budget documents are there. They're not, hidden away for only experts to look at. Any New Yorker can actually review these documents themselves and learn by doing how the city budget is actually made. And in doing so, I think gain some real power as a resident to be able to influence the city's future direction.
All right. Well, Eli, thank you so much for joining me and having this discussion.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
To keep up with the Center for an Urban Future, please go to their website at www.nycfuture.org. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Open right after this.